Hello everyone, I'm Kevin from Snob Entertainment and I'm working on the game project Astra Dominium. We just released a new version of the game with a feature called RecipeModification. Let's jump into the video where I showcase everything. I've prepared a little base to show you the RecipeModification. We unlocked the 7th Euro protocol which wants you to leverage the RecipeModification. My base is set up in a specific way. The grabbers are configured with if condition is true, inventory has less than, and then the resource I want to craft and then 50 or some value. This way the grabber doesn't grab resources away from me when a certain threshold of items is already created. To unlock RecipeModification, we need to go to Kasuna and kill the dragon. I will speed up the video to the dragon kill so you don't have to endure me playing this level. So after the dragon has spawned, we can click on him and see that he has the skill unlocks RecipeModification on death. So we have to kill this dragon to unlock RecipeModification, but actually we don't have to clear this level. As soon as the dragon is killed, the RecipeModification is unlocked, but to get more resources, it makes sense to finish this level strong. So 7th Euro protocol, we got a tick that we unlocked the RecipeModification, and RecipeModification is in the manual crafting menu. When we click on Vulcan Cannon Tier 1, we see a modify button at the bottom right. Currently only Vulcan Cannon Tier 1, Railgun Tier 1, Copper Ingot and Iron Ingot are modifiable. The reason for that is that we need to do further balancing. Euro protocol wants us to modify a copper ingot, and that's what we do. For that, you click on the copper ingot and click on modify. Then we see the RecipeModification screen. The first thing you want to do is enter a name for the receipt. We can change the receipt name while we modify the receipt. It is not possible to change the name afterwards. In the middle of the screen, you also see an error list, which basically wants us to fill the required slots. On the left side of the screen, we see multiple slots and we can put items into that, which basically builds the receipt at the end. At the top, you see a quantity of 5. This means that this receipt can get 5 items put into it. On the left side, you see a level. Better items increase the level more, and this receipt can only have a maximum level of 28. The top slot is in a category required, so we need to fill it in. It takes 3 items, so let's put in 3 copper ore. This receipt is now exactly the same as the receipt that we already have with the default copper ingot. On the right side of this receipt, we see our custom name and how long this receipt takes to craft, and also how many items it will receive. On the left side, we see optional slots, and these optional slots can be filled in with items to get those buffs. Let's add a coal to this first optional slot to get the receipt buff -1 second. So this basically creates a receipt that is 1 second faster than the default receipt we see on the right side above. On the left side that we added the coal, and at the complete right side we see all items that go into the receipt. And we also see that now the ingot takes 1 second instead of 2 seconds to craft. You can get more optional slots into this receipt. As you can see on the left side, there's a minimum amount. That's the amount of items that need to go into a slot to get the slot buff. Also, they have different categories. The top one is optional. You can get all of these buffs if the items can handle that. And there's effect 1 mutually exclusive, which basically means you can only get one of those buffs in the receipt. When we fill in the bottom one, you see the top one gets hidden. And if we remove the item we added, the top one comes back and we can get the top one buff. The problem with getting the top one buff is that it needs 2 items to get the buff, but our quantity is just not enough to get in there 2 items. So at the top you see the slot min buff, and when I add it, it is gray out. I don't get the buff because there are not enough items in the slot. I could try to add more items to the slot, but then the quantity is not enough, and we see an error that we have put too many items into the receipt and the quantity is negative. So we basically can't get the optional buff with the -1 to the crafting time and the optional effect 1 because we don't have enough items. So we could remove one item from the optional buff to get the other buff, and this would be possible if that is what you aim for. But I don't want fire damage piercing. I want the fire damage itself. So let's remove the mutually exclusive slot and get the -1 second receipt buff again, and also get the other mutually exclusive buff, which gives fire damage +1, but also debuffs the receipt by 1 second, which basically negates the other buff we get, but we also don't get the debuff. But at the end, we have a custom ingot with fire damage +1, and I would also put that in the name of the ingot itself. We can check what the receipt items are, and then let's save this receipt. On the left side of the crafting, we now see our custom ingot, and we could handcraft it, and we see all the resources that goes into it. We could also modify the copper ingot again and leverage this new custom ingot to improve the copper ingot even further. We can put this custom ingot into the new copper ingot receipt and do what we call receipt modification inception. Those buffs from the copper ingot, the fire +1, gets inherited down into the new receipt, so that when we save them into the slot, or we can remove them, you can also mix those items if you want to. So we could 1 copper ore or 2 of our customs, but in this case we want 3 of our custom ingots in there to get the maximum value. Those custom ingots increase the level by 5 per each ingot, because the ingot is basically stronger than a normal ore or a normal ingot, because of the buff that we get when we equipment craft with this ingot. And as we can see, with the normal copper ore, the level increased just by 1, but with the custom ingot, it increases by 5, which brings us to 15. But when we give the receipt a name, which I totally forget, that's why we see the error, then we see that the equipment crafting buff of those ingots is actually inherited down to the new ingot. And also, because I have done this before, I know that we get a custom copper ingot fire +4 at the end, so I put that in the name. And we see on the left side the ingots that we have put into the slots and with the values. Everything is explained on the right side in more detail, but I think this video will help you more. Then we add a 1 coal at the bottom again to get the fire +1 buff. We also add a coal to the other optional buff, and let's save the receipt. Back at the crafting screen, we see now that we have 2 modified custom ingots receipt. We could also modify the receipt again, which I don't do here because it gets quite expensive to craft those receipts after a while. So as you can see, our custom ingot +1 needs 3 ore and 2 coal, and our custom fire ingot +4 needs 3 custom ingot fire +1 and 2 coal. So it gets quite expensive really fast to craft those ingots. What we can do to leverage those ingots is start crafting equipment with those ingots. For that we need to modify an equipment. For example, the Vulcan Cannon Tier 1, which basically needs iron and copper ingots, and we can modify it. At the left side again, we need to fill in those required fields. We haven't any custom ingots, so let's just fill in the min amount. And then for the heat element, we can fill in our custom ingots, which will improve the equipment that we will craft at the end. Also, we can give it a name. I just name it Vulcan because it adds custom itself to all custom receipts. It gets the equipment buff from the default equipment plus our ingots, which gives us +8 fire damage. Each ingot has +4. We can also add even more ingots than the min amount to a slot, but since this optional slot also needs ingots, we add 2 ingots here to get the slot buff from the slot. Why not? I think that's a better idea than getting nothing and just putting in 4 ingots. So with the buff we get fire piercing. We could also try to get the other optional buff, which needs copper cable, but this is not what I want to do here. I think adding more of those custom fire plus 4 ingot will be more beneficial to our Vulcan cannon. So let's just add more of those ingots to the receipt, which quite pumps up the fire damage of our equipment at the end. Our quantity is at 0 and basically we pumped up our receipt level to 61, which thankfully is below 65, so we can basically craft this receipt. And we get 32 fire damage and some fire piercing. In the crafting menu again, we see the normal Vulcan cannon and our custom receipt. As you can see, the normal Vulcan cannon only gives physical damage +2 or +5, depending on what you roll when you craft the equipment. But on our custom receipt, we see we get the same physical damage, but we also get the fire damage that we got from our custom ingots and the piercing from the optional slot that we filled in the Vulcan cannon receipt. But also this receipt needs 8 custom ingot fire +4. These values in the receipt equipment is basically min and max values which you can roll. So it's kinda lucky or unlucky when you craft this receipt what you get at the end. We can handcraft everything, but it makes more sense to automate the process. So let's automate this receipt in our base and get some Vulcan cannons going with our custom buff to it. Like every ingot, we can build a smelter and select the receipt in the smelter. This time we just select our custom receipt, which also needs to add coal. So we need to add coal to it. And obviously the copper ore. Let's create this pipeline complete. So we take this copper ore ingot, custom +1, and create a custom copper ingot +4 out of it. So we need to grab it on a belt. We need to grab it from a belt to our smelter. We could directly grab it into the smelter, but I use the belt here. And then we grab it, our custom ingot +4 directly into the assembler with our custom Vulcan cannon receipt applied to it. And the custom Vulcan cannon also need iron ingots. So let's get those iron ingots in real fast. Let's select iron ingots, add a drone to the requester, else it doesn't work. And now we have a Vulcan cannon craft going, and when a Vulcan cannon gets crafted, we need to put it back to the inventory so we can equip it to the tower slot. Also, what I totally forget is we need to get coal to our custom ingots, because our custom receipt needs coal, not like the default receipt. The default receipt only needs copper ore. I use a splitter here to distribute the coal properly, 50-50 between those two smelters. The splitter doesn't need a grabber, it directly goes into the belt, which might be quite counterintuitive, but that's how the system basically works. And we grab the coal from the requester into the belt, it goes into the splitter, and the splitter will evenly split the coal between those smelters. We finished Evo Protocol 7, so let's just fast finish that one. And then I will fast this up because this pipeline is really slow. Usually I recommend going into a tower defense level now and farm for resources. But for now, for the purpose of this video, I will cut through when the assembler will start crafting. So the assembler is crafting our Vulcan cannon. Now the Vulcan cannon will be grabbed into our drone pod sender, and our drone flies our crafting equipment home. Only when the drone arrives at home, the equipment is available for selection. Now that we have crafted it, we can select it, and we can see that I had a really bad roll because we could have had 32 or something fire damage. Let's check that real fast. Go to the custom recipe of the Vulcan cannon. We could have had 32 fire damage, but I just rolled +8 fire damage, which is a bummer, but it's still way better than the default recipe. And this concludes basically the feature recipe modification. Thank you, and I hope you have a blast with this new update. Bye.